Leftovers I made, took leftovers
No way. All right, good evening. We are here tonight to review reopening plans regarding the potential return to full in-person instruction for Mid-Lake schools, and more specifically at the elementary school. I'm Todd Clausen, Public Relations Coordinator for the Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District. With me today are Superintendent Matt Sickles, Elementary Principal Chris Moyer, Assistant Elementary School Principal Elena Benzer, Director of Facilities Mike Riefsteck, and John Lombardi, our beloved AD, who also serves as District COVID-19 Coordinator. And I cannot forget Michelle Robinette, who's our Director for Curriculum and Instruction. Before we get into it, we'd like to remind all families tonight the importance of completing the UPK 6 survey, now posted on midlakes.org. It's important to hear from all families in this survey. Even if you completed previous surveys, this is important not only to engage your input and tolerance for a return to school, but also for help in planning for transportation purposes. I mentioned tolerance. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's a guideline that's established to kind of just basically get feedback from the public as to what they think we should be doing. Mr. Sickles, I'd like to start off with you. You know that a lot of guidelines have come out in the past few weeks. I'm curious if a decision has been made, and if a decision will be made, what will that mean at the elementary school? So I got you two questions there.
Okay, you have to remind me when I forget the first or second one, whichever one I leave out. So an official decision at this point has not been made. However, I will say that our entire team is planning with the full expectation that we will return to full in-person instruction for UPK through grade 6. And I'll explain why those grades in a minute. But it's one, I fully expect the community feedback, the parent feedback to trend in that direction. And it's just easier to plan since that would represent the greatest change. Staying the same would require no change at all. So we're better off planning for the change, putting all the measures in place, and then if somehow by a surprise the feedback were that families wanted to stay exactly the same, we would rather have put in that extra effort and not need it than be scrambling. So we will present and we'll talk about a lot of different feedback and information that we're in the process of collecting, and we'll present all of that to the Board of Education on Wednesday night at the regular board meeting. It is on a Wednesday this month. We'll present that. We fully expect to be able to make a formal recommendation at that point, and should have a pretty good sense of our direction moving forward. So not an official decision, but we're moving forward, assuming that we will be returning the elementary grades to full in-person. The reason, what was the second question before I get into my next train of thought?
Well, what actually, let's back up because it's right on my head now, right? What are the decisions that have been made from the Department of Health and the CDC, like for schools, and how is that impact our planning?
Okay, so back in March, the CDC came out with recommendations for operational changes for schools based upon reduced social distancing that allowed, under certain circumstances, to go from 6 feet to 3 feet. Took a couple weeks for the New York State Department of Health, who we're accountable to adopt those recommendations and come out with guidelines based upon those recommendations. And both the CDC recommendations and the state guidelines basically make school district decisions conditional upon a couple of different factors. So they vary by grade level because the science says that there's less of a risk of transmission at the lower grade levels and a higher risk of transmission as the kids get older. And then it's also therefore based upon the local community's COVID-19 transmission rate, and specifically on the county where the school is located. So our options are tied to the county transmission rate. And they basically the CDC created, I believe it's 4 levels: low, moderate, substantial, and high risk, based upon the cumulative number of COVID-19 cases in the county over a rolling 7-day period. So every day, the one day falls off and today gets added, so to speak. So currently, Ontario County is, like most counties in New York, are classified as high risk. That means they have 100 or more cases per 100,000 people over the 7-day rolling time period. Last week, we were up close to 230 cases per 100,000 people over a 7-day average, over a 7-day rolling period in Ontario County. Those numbers have started to come down. I believe today by the CDC website, we're 182 per 100,000 people. So it is trending in a positive direction, but there's a long way to go. And what we have said is, so at the high transmission level, our options are very limited at the middle high school level. Basically, at the middle high school level, if you're in a high transmission area, you can only move to 3 feet physical distancing if you use cohorts. And cohorts means keeping a small group of kids together in one place, one room, all day long for the duration, for the rest of the school year, or an entire school year, potentially. And at the secondary level, that's very difficult to do because every student's schedule is a little bit different. You and I might have the same English class and same English teacher at the same time, but then we go, second period, we go different places. I go to this social studies class, you go to that math class. And, so it's very dynamic under normal circumstances. So to cohort at the secondary level would require everybody to stay put. Well, that basically means remote learning in school. Yes, you get to come to school every day, but you get to sit in one room all day and learn remotely on your tablet because you can't move around because we're in a high transmission rate. We don't feel that makes any sense instructionally and would actually represent a step backwards. And certainly, a little later on, maybe Michelle can speak to that from a curriculum and instruction standpoint. So at this point, we're not focusing on 7-12. If the numbers continue to trend significantly downward, then we will put out surveys, questionnaires to 7-12 families and staff and start planning in that direction. But we've identified May 3rd as sort of a rough cutoff date, that if the transmission rate doesn't drop low enough by then, figuring it would then take 2 weeks to mobilize. Now you're at May 17th. Going any later than May 17th to say May 24th, when the last day of classes before Regents exams is probably going to be June 16th, probably isn't worth all the disruption that it would cause to people's routines. But we're going to watch that. And if the numbers continue to aggressively decline, then we'll look in that direction. But for now, we're focusing on elementary, because at the elementary level, even in a high transmission area, you can still go to 3 feet under certain circumstances. Cohorting is recommended, and we already basically cohort for the most part because students stay in one classroom for the most part all school day. And we might have to make a few adjustments in a couple areas to make that true across the board. But we just, according to the guidelines, both the CDC recommendations and the New York State Department of Health guidelines, we can do more at the elementary level. We can still go to 3 feet in the classroom, even in the high transmission area that Ontario County currently is.
And kind of getting back to that classroom management, for some reason, foreign language keeps on popping in my mind, right? Kids take English class together, and then if they take separate foreign language classes, that could be, yeah, get very, very crazy and confusing in that classroom. There's another question that, we have received some feedback on a hybrid model offering, right? And so there's a couple questions in the survey that kind of one specifically asked, do you want as is or do you want to change? And then there's another option that is, if we do go to 5-day full, do you want 5-day remote or 5-day in person? So with that last option, it's basically remote or in person and no hybrid model. Can you explain a little bit about why there's not a hybrid option in there?
Right. So first of all, this is the second survey, second questionnaire that we put out. The first was kind of based on some guesswork because we didn't know entirely what our circumstances were going to be. The second questionnaire is based upon a little bit more concrete information of what it would take for us to make this work at Mid Lakes. And I know you're going to ask me some questions in a little bit about measuring the community's tolerance for risk and getting a sense of what the community is comfortable with. Because every school has different circumstances, and that's why our plan has always looked different from other schools and other schools from us, because every school has unique circumstances. So we have to ask questions of our community based upon what full in-person instruction would look like here at Mid Lakes and what are families comfortable with. And therefore, we felt it was important to ask that first question. Given this is what it would look like, and we'll get into a little bit of that in a minute, given, your tolerance for risk, would you prefer that we stay in the hybrid model and just finish out the year that way? Or would you prefer that we switch to full in-person? No, and still allow families the option of fully remote that they've had all year. So that was just a question that was put in there to make sure that we were being thorough in giving families all the options to choose from. Like, what's your preference? Then, putting that question aside, we then ask, if the district does decide to switch to full in-person instruction, according to the description we provided, what would you pick? If you had to choose, would you pick full in-person or would you pick full remote? The reason hybrid is not there as an option under those circumstances, so the hybrid model was a compromise model to begin with. The hybrid model was built upon the premise of what we could do at 6 feet social distancing. Okay, that's why it was offered. That's really the only reason it was offered, because it's as much as we could do at 6 feet given our unique circumstances. If we are going to make full in-person instruction available, it means we're going to 3 feet. So at that point, you're at 3 feet. Offering the hybrid, which is based upon 6 feet, really makes no sense, number one. Number two, you're then asking the entire staff to run 3 models simultaneously, having some kids who are 5 days a week in person, some kids who are 2 days a week in person, and some kids who are 5 days a week remote at home. And running 2 options at the same time is challenging enough. To have students in 3 models and expecting us to safely and accurately and with high quality deliver that on a daily basis, we just don't feel would be an appropriate use of our resources. And certainly, I think our building level leaders, principal and assistant principal, and our director of curriculum instruction could certainly add to that from an instructional standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you just queued up our elementary school staff, our administrators here. So let's get them involved in the conversation a little bit. Mr. Moyer, Mrs. Benzer, how about right now, sort of the big buckets? What might a full return 5-day in-person instruction for our kids at the elementary school look like in terms of getting on the bus, eating in the cafeteria, roaming the hallways, that type of thing?
How much time do we have, Todd?
Of course. I knew that was going to be the next question.
I mean, what you just described is a lot. So really, what you're going to see is, anybody that's been in our school on a regular school day prior to last March, we're going to try to make it as similar to that as possible, while practicing within the guidelines. We want our students to, when we're back in school, we want them back in school. We want to make it that full experience. We just have to be careful about masks, social distancing when we're doing certain types of activities. We're still working through some of that problem solving right now. And I say that because it is work in progress. So if you want to talk about the bus, I can't really speak to transportation. That is not an area that I feel that I would want to discuss in detail, other than, our transportation department is working very hard, and you could see some, potential shifts in transportation with timing and that type of thing. But other than that, I'm not going to speak to transportation, other than we'll be at the buses in the morning, and what our plan with the buses themselves, once they arrive at school, which is where we pick up our responsibility as building administrators, is to meet them at the bus, and we're going to unload one bus at a time.
Right.
Because we have our kiosks to still manage. So we're not going to necessarily change our procedures, because we have to get the kids in the building through 2 entrances that have the 4 kiosks. So we're going to manage that very closely, and that will be the same with arrival of parent drop-offs. We've been working on a schedule. It's going to come down to being clear about communicating the time of arrival for every grade level, trying to get parents to adhere to those times, drop their students off, and then go through. And we're going to go back. If you remember, August, we worked very hard through August with committees. And I will say that our procedures that we put in place served us very well, opening in September. Through adding, 4th, 5th, 6th grade in, that pre-planning, that listening, the process of a lot of stakeholders involved, paid dividends in the way things worked, and it was very smooth. So we've been working kind of backwards. We're going to put some of the things that helped us function very well in September back into place that we've discontinued, such as stop sign holders out in the driveways, helping manage some traffic with radios communicating up to the circle, that type of thing, just to try to manage that flow of traffic in a not ideal parking lot. So I'm going to let Mrs. Benzer speak a little bit, because
I know you
Got a
haven't
lot.
talked too much about specials. The way it's worked since we started school is special area teachers have been pushing into the classroom to deliver their instruction in the areas of PE, music, art, library. And we're looking at changing that up a little bit, as far as hopefully being able to utilize the art room, utilize the outside space for physical education. So we're really hopeful that there will be a lot of nice days in our future. And, again, making sure that we're following the guidelines, the social distancing, the masking, that type of thing. But we're hopeful to be able to utilize some different space rather than the classroom.
Great. Also too, if you go to midlegs.org and you jump on the UPK 6 survey, you will see a bunch of bullet points that are kind of like the start of some of the general areas, general health safety protocols that the school may implement in a full return for UPK 6. So Mr. Moyer mentioned the mask wearing at all times, students being seated 3 feet apart. Adults will still be spaced 6 feet apart from others. During meals, students will be grouped by cohort in cafeteria, and those cohorts will be separated from each other, have additional spacing. On busing, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, the thought is to have potentially students seated up to 2 per seat as needed, with those being put together first, daycare, children that are from the same daycare, the same household together. And then as more students get on the bus, they'll be, added to those additional seats to try to minimize the full time that those students who aren't from the same household or same daycare are together, just to kind of try to reduce the contact tracing. Also, ventilation will be increased by opening windows, roof hatches, things like that. Those are some of the initial thoughts. But kind of getting that that full picture. I wonder, Ms. Benzer, Mr. Moyer, scheduling. Right now the sixth graders kind of are on a different schedule than most of the other students. Do you see that the sixth graders coming back into a schedule with the rest, or do you think they'll stay where they are, or we're not sure yet?
So we have every intention right now of keeping the sixth graders where they are, because the reason the sixth grade was put where they were to begin with was because of spacing on the buses, and that was within a hybrid model. So you're adding sixth grade numbers back in, you're adding another 100+ students back into the busing. That is something that will make it impossible. So, and our kids are doing well with that, the schedule. There's been some real benefits to it that we're looking at, but so we don't intend to change sixth grade as of right now, as we stand. And like Mr. Sickles opened with, this is all a work in progress. This is something that isn't, we're going forward as if it's happening, but we're looking at it from every angle and what works and what could work. Because that's a big piece too. What could work if this happens? I'd like to let Mrs. Benzer speak to, if she'd like to the other schedules, the rest of the building.
Yeah, as far as K-5, we are planning on keeping the schedule as is. We're committed to making sure that our routines and procedures that are in place in school remain consistent. And so that's our plan for moving forward.
Okay. One more quick question. There's always some great events at the elementary school to finish out the year. I've even been contacted by some of the teachers planning up for some of these events. It sounds like we're trying to move forward where possible. What can you tell the families out there?
Well, we've charged the teams with investigating things that we can do again to get back to the traditions and maybe start some new ones. The things that we've done in the past, that again, working within guidelines. Mr. Lombardi's been extremely helpful with a lot of this to help our teachers kind of navigate how to get that many kids together for outdoor type events. Can we have spectators? Can we stream these events so parents can see it? But, we're going to look to do some of those events, such as the second grade track meet. We would like to get back to do some of the end of the year, the carnival day that we've always done, where different groups put together different games, get the kids outdoors. If we come back to the purpose for this discussion, up till now, we've been planning this stuff on a hybrid model, so we have a good plan for being able to make this work two different ways. The Memorial Day, I know all the kids in first and second grade right now are learning their Memorial Day songs. I don't know 100% how that looks, because the odds of getting everybody packed together in our gymnasium, I would say, isn't going to happen. But we feel it's important to honor our vets and keep some of those traditions alive as well as we can. Elena, do you have anything to add?
That we've been committed to making sure that we have shared experiences, whether it's hybrid, whether it's virtual, whether it's whatever the case may be. And we are looking forward to continuing to plan those things. And I know that the teachers are really eager to make it happen.
Great.
So. Great.
I'm glad to hear everybody's working on it, because they're so important to so many people. Ms. Robinette, I want to hit you up for a question here. So if we do go back to, have this full return for UPK 6 to school, how do you expect the transition to be handled in the classroom?
Yeah, so, if an announcement is made from the district level or from the building level that the change is going to happen, it would be the teachers who are going to communicate any changes to the classroom schedule. So our teachers, like all of us, are looking forward to having students in front of them. They're, excited at the prospect of bringing kids in 5 days a week. And they are using Seesaw as their main message communication system with families. So families would expect to see something come through Seesaw if there's a change to the way their daily schedule might look, or the rotation of which days do they need their sneakers for PE. All that would come from the teachers, and then parents would just need to reach out to the teacher if they have questions once they receive those communications.
Great. Mr. Reefstack, you have the facilities guys, the guys who are the sort of grunt behind getting everything set up. I've seen I don't know how many chairs in the cafeteria last week, just kind of getting ready. Can you take us through some of the things that you've been doing to prepare for a potential return, and then once the green light, if a green light's given, what happens from there?
Sure. Preparing for the most part has been trying to start to move furniture back into the buildings. We started about a month ago, staging desks and chairs, any place we could find some space, hallways. We just had the cafeteria, it looks like a warehouse for a furniture store. So getting all that back into the building so that as soon as we did get some guidance from the state, we could start to move forward, getting things back into the classroom. So, so that's been done for a little bit now. So good.
And it'll just, once a green light's given, it's going to take about 2 weeks or so to get it ready. Is that what you're anticipating at this moment?
That's what we're going to figure out how to make happen one way or another. Yes. We have kind of a plan in place right now. As soon as we know for sure that the board wants to move ahead with this, that we'll start moving things into the classrooms. The day crews will start coming in earlier in the morning, so we can start probably a couple hours early before the normal start time, and then they'll stay in the evenings to continue to move stuff in after the teachers have gone home, with the goal that maybe one weekend in there as well we'll have to work, but mostly mornings before school and evenings after. It'd be mostly the folks that work during the day, because the night folks still have to work and do all the cleaning that they're already doing. So we don't have them to be able to use to help. So that's kind of the plan. We're thinking it should work out pretty well. So
yeah, I guess you can't be moving a whole bunch of furniture in a classroom as class goes on, right? So that's kind of
no, that's exactly it. And Matt hears this quite regularly from me: is when can we start? Because we want to make sure we meet the deadline and get the kids back here as soon as possible, because I know that's what everybody's been looking forward to since we had to move them all out of here.
Gotcha. So I know the guidance has changed. When this pandemic first came out, it was always clean, deep clean, and do more cleaning on top of cleaning, and wipe the shine off the clean. But it's changed a little bit. And now if we have kids coming back, 5 days a week, it kind of cuts into a little bit of the time that your crews would be cleaning. So will they double down a little bit more at night or during off hours of school?
Nights will stay pretty close to the same. They'll still clean and then disinfect afterwards like they have been.
Okay.
Daytime, there'll still be somebody going around doing all the high touch surfaces, the entrance doors, all the classroom doors, the bathrooms get done multiple times a day. All of that. The only thing that has changed significantly, and it probably won't affect how we do things much, is that they've said it's less likely to transmit the COVID from hard surfaces. So CDC had recommended that you could go back to soap and water for cleaning the desktops. I think we're going to just continue with the product that we've been using just to be safe. And honestly, it's easier to use in the classrooms as well. It's a peroxide-based product, so it has a very fast kill time of a minute or less, and it works very well, and it dries fast, and the teachers don't have to work with trying to continue to, fresh water, soap, and towels, and things of that nature. So
Gotcha. And of course, I mean, we'll still have hand sanitizing stations around schools for anybody who wants them. Um, everybody will be wearing masks still. I do know that we still want people to complete their daily health screening app. Mr. Lombardi, I'm kind of migrating over to you now. Are there other safety precautions individuals should be taking? Remind us of some of those things that we should be, if you could.
I mean, we're still expected to wear a face mask when in school, making sure you still are hand washing, doing all those proper things. If you don't feel well at all, especially now that we're moving down to 3 feet, if you don't feel well, stay home. Make sure you contact the nurse if you have any questions about, should I send my child to school or not? When in doubt, just give the school nurse a call and they'll help you kind of walk through that. And that's why that daily health screener is there to kind of go through the steps of these are the symptoms. Do I have a symptom? Yes or no? And then that will kind of help prompt you, should I contact the school nurse, and that type of thing, And that's why it's important they fill them out too, because anyone that we miss, we go around and kind of follow up on anyone that hasn't filled that out. So now that we're going to have double the amount of kids, it's even more important that we make sure that we get that filled out before coming in on campus to kind of help out our nursing staff and whoever's going around, making sure that those are filled out.
Gotcha. So one thing you've been really good at, because I know you have the connection with the Ontario County Department of Health, is information on free tests, vaccine clinics that are being held, some by the county on the county grounds, some by FF Thompson Hospital and elsewhere. From time to time, we do share those on our social media to keep people informed. Those who want to get a vaccine, we like to share that information. All right, it's just sharing it for the people that want it, because we know that there are some people that do want it. Obviously the choice of vaccine is an individual choice on that. As we kind of painted this whole picture now, families are should know a little bit more about what a 5-day return to school might be. And I know, Matt, Mr. Sickles, I'm coming back to you again. That kind of ties in. Now that you got the picture, we're also through the survey trying to measure, and I'm probably going to say this wrong because I won't quote the CDC or the state, the community's tolerance for risk. Did I get that right? Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's such an important factor in this whole picture there?
Sure. So I want to tie together a few things that have been said by all the panelists. So the philosophy of the CDC and the New York State Department of Health, dating all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic and reopening, when we were planning last summer, getting ready for September, was a multi-layered approach to mitigation strategies. That there was no one measure that was going to keep people safe from the coronavirus. So, masks were one piece. Social distancing, physical distancing is another piece. Washing hands using hand sanitizer is another piece. And, staying home when you're feeling ill, filling out the daily health questionnaire, having students' temperatures taken. All of these different things that we do combine to keep our students and staff as safe as possible. Well, now, through this new guidance based upon the CDC recommendations, you're scaling back one of those mitigation strategies. You're taking physical distancing from 6 feet in many, not in every situation, but in the classroom and some other situations too, and you're bringing it back to 3 feet. So what that does is, with that comes increased risk because you're closer together. It makes all of the other mitigation strategies that much more important. To John's point, filling out that daily health questionnaire is critical because, our nurses now are going to be dealing with double the number of questionnaires every day. and having to respond to students not feeling well, anything families can do to help cut back on that by remembering to fill out the daily health questionnaire is going to help us manage the situation. If there's any suspicion or fear that the family may have been exposed to COVID-19, keeping that student home and calling our nurses for some guidance and feedback and maybe connecting with public health, that's going to help, because that's going to prevent a potential exposure to an entire classroom that may lead to far more quarantines at 3 feet apart than we may have faced at 6 feet apart. It makes, again, the mask wearing, the hand sanitizer, all those things more important. And your original question was about measuring the community's tolerance for risk. And that's built into the new guidance. It says, listen, not every, no two districts are built the same. No two school buildings are the same. No two communities are the same. For us, busing is an issue. You know, we've been very open and transparent about this all year. You know, in some cases, lack of transportation, shortage of bus drivers has caused us to have to switch to remote learning. We don't have the ability to send out more bus runs, although we're hiring, we're actively in the process. We will continue to hire as much as we can, especially in the transportation department, to create that ability to spread out. But we know, based upon the information we've collected so far, you know, based on the number of families who legitimately need district transportation. You know, we appreciate all the families who are able, who have that luxury of being able to provide, or I shouldn't say luxury, because sometimes it comes with a hardship and they're going out of their way to really help us out by bringing their children to school or carpooling. But we understand and respect that not every family is in a position to do so and truly needs the district provided transportation. So we know that in many cases, the only way we can get every student, every elementary student here on the same day is to potentially have 2 students per seat. Now, that is a more liberal interpretation of the guidelines. They recommend more social distancing than that, but they say whenever possible. In some cases in the document, they say whenever possible, and in some cases they don't. Transportation is one where they say whenever possible. Well, we know we can't get everybody here if we stick to 1 per seat. So as you mentioned, the plan would be that we start with siblings, anybody from the same household, same daycare, they would immediately go 2 to a seat. Then the next kid gets on the bus, they don't live with anybody. So they go sit alone. 2 siblings get on, they sit together. Another kid gets on, sits alone. Next 2 seats are siblings, that's great. That's the order we would go in. And then later in the bus run, the closer we are to the kids getting off the bus at school, then we would start adding the second kid to the seat with somebody that they don't live with. But with masks for the shortest period of time possible. And not every bus run would require that. And we won't truly know until we get that feedback from every UPK through 6 family, because we need that feedback to recreate the bus routes. But we want our families to know, in order to make this work, your child may very well, for a period of time, and we'll try to keep that period of time short, be 2 to a seat with another child. And that comes down to, is our community comfortable with that level of risk? And that's why we put those bullets on there and why we're asking families to answer based upon that information. So we want to be very transparent.
Well, let's maybe even take it a little bit further. We have a bus of kids and maybe they're not all to proceed, but there's a lot of them, and one student tests positive. We don't want that to happen. You know, we hope it doesn't happen, but there could be a case, I'm guessing, where everybody could be quarantined on that bus.
Yeah, I mean, John works very closely with the Department of Health, and buses are unique and a challenge. We haven't been in this situation with students seated that closely before. I would certainly expect, probably at the minimum, you know, if everybody's doing a really good job wearing their mask, but they're 2 to a seat, you could be looking at a minimum of 8 to 10 kids on that bus being quarantined. If they're not doing a good job of mask wearing, then you could potentially have the whole bus. If the weather's cooperating and we're able to have the windows open and the hatches up so ventilation is good, that's going to be a mitigating factor in our favor. John, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I mean, the very first question that they always ask is that child a good masker? And then they ask who was sitting next to them, how close were they to that person, are the people around them good maskers? It's kind of the thing that they look at. Sometimes we have to look at film if they're not sure, to see, you know, if they were, if they weren't, especially if they're the younger kids. Some of it does depend on, like we talked about before, it just depends on age level and things like that. But, you know, the distance does make a difference. They could, like Matt said, they could be a little more aggressive with quarantining kids. You know, in the classroom, sometimes they've asked us, mainly like if it's around lunchtime because they're not wearing a mask and things like that, they might quarantine the person to the left, to the right, front and back, whoever's in that direct right next to them. I'm assuming that if they start to, you know, decrease that space, instead of quarantining maybe 4, maybe there's 8 kids that would be quarantined. I mean,
Right.
Again, it's just based on what the DOH says, and we give them the information. I give the teachers a questionnaire that we've kind of worked up with the DOH. I send that out to them. They do some investigating, and then they kind of determine who gets quarantined from there. And then we're asked to kind of pass that information along to families, because we can get a hold of them a lot faster than the contact tracers can when they call them.
It's really important that, you know, and I know people probably stopped reading my daily positive case reports a long time ago, but embedded in those messages, it says that quarantines are precautionary. Okay, the DOH quarantines, it doesn't mean that if your child is quarantined, they're going to get COVID. Doesn't mean they won't, but it doesn't absolutely mean that they will. They're trying to stop the spread of COVID. So they quarantine as a precaution. And again, that's where it comes in, as John has said, is layering all of those mitigation strategies, being good with the mask, washing hands, our cleaning protocols. Yes, you know, if we move forward on this plan, we'll be operating at closer distances. Again, we have to be better at the other pieces. One really important concept I want to talk about in terms of, you know, measuring the community's tolerance for risk kind of goes back a little bit to something that Michelle said, that, you know, our teachers are really looking forward to having our kids back. And that is 100% true. We all are. We all want back to normal, more than we could ever adequately put into words. But I think we can all admit and acknowledge that this is hopefully the most complicated and challenging situation, I hope, that any of us will ever experience in our lifetime. And it leads to a lot of conflicting goals and emotions. We want to be back to normal. We want full in-person instruction. We want normalcy. We want all of our kids here, because that's where learning happens. That's where school is dynamic and fun and exciting. We want all of that. But we also want our students and staff to be safe and healthy and here for a long time. And we find ourselves in a position where those two things have been right or wrong, placed in conflict with each other. And as we're given this opportunity to go to a shorter distance and increase in-person instruction at the elementary level, we have to balance these, and we have to do it with eyes open. We have to be very transparent and put all the information out there so that parents can make an educated, informed decision for their child. Yes, we want them back in person. Yes, we want them to be safe. And if our community and our parents can feel confident that both of those things can happen at the same time, then we're ready to make that work and welcome them back. And we're going to be working hard on our end to make both of those goals attainable and a reality on a daily basis. Okay, but nobody can guarantee anything. So we want to be just completely open and honest about what it would look like for our students on a daily basis.
Yeah, with kind of more people throughout our state and country getting vaccinated, you can kind of see an end in this long tunnel that we've been
Certainly hope so.
For a long time. Yeah. And it's very easy though. And I think this is to your point. It's very easy to let our guard down a little bit, not do everything that we should. So it's a good opportunity to remind ourselves of some of the things that we should be doing. Mr. Reefstack, I want to come back to you briefly about HVAC systems and requirements, and if they changed, or what have we done to kind of address, or, we kind of talked about the ventilation on school buses, just kind of crank open a window. Schools are a little different. Can you talk to us briefly about that?
Sure. The guidance back in September suggested that we run the units longer and a little earlier in the morning, a little later in the evenings to get more air turnovers in the buildings. More filter changes. The current guidance just kind of grows off of that plan, where they're actually recommending even more runtime now for the equipment, which opens up its own unique set of circumstances trying to maintain it all. But their exhaust fans and things of that nature, they're actually recommending that we run them 24 hours a day now, so we're preparing a lot of that equipment now so that we'll do that through the end of the school year, and hopefully by fall things will be in a better place. But yeah, a lot of scheduling adjustments with the HVAC equipment and things of that nature. We have the luxury of having heating, and we have AC in our buildings almost everywhere, which is a nice thing that a lot of other districts don't. This is like the worst time of the year to ever be making all these changes, because you need heat in the morning, you need air conditioning at lunchtime. So we were already dealing with that, and now trying to
AC, please.
Right now we're trying to rewrite all these schedules to run longer in the mornings, run much earlier in the mornings and much later in the evenings. It's going to make it should be in good shape.
How many guys are part of your staff?
All total, about 19 actually.
And I got to say, and this, we could say this for a lot of people at Mid Lakes, but every time I run into one of your guys, your crew, I see them cleaning, they're working, they're hard, they're dedicated, they're doing the job. And, it's always a pleasant interaction with them each and every time, I mean, it goes with a lot of the staff at Mid Lakes. I mean, it's like everybody who I encounter, and I'm, usually doing something to promote their great work. So maybe it's a little easy, but it's your guys are the ones sort of behind the scenes often that are getting everything done and doing some of, the physical lifting to get everything ready. So, just send it back to me. I'm sure everybody on the panel, what a great job they've been doing. The transportation department as well has been doing an awesome job. Later on this week, I think it's definitely going to be in the next Mid Lakes Journal. Almost a calendar year, 281,000 meals prepared by our food services staff and sent out to our families and our kids. Just an amazing job. And they're not even, usually they're used to being in the cafeteria and serving them in the line, and now food's going all over the place. Not a food fight, but just going all over our community to get them ready. I mean,
Sure.
so there's certainly been one ripple effect on how the district has addressed it, and also this plan is creating an absolute different ripple effect onto everything. Is there anything else, Mr. Sickles, that you wanted to address or that we haven't addressed in terms of either the ripple effect or just the next steps too, as to make getting that plan if it is going to get put in place?
Right. So a couple of things. So first of all, again, this has been a very difficult conversation. Or a situation that we've been in for over a year now. And we know that, there are flaws to any plan. There's certainly things that we can do better. And we've taken our share of criticism. I will tell you that we are our own biggest critics because we always want to do better for our kids. We want them here, and we're constantly questioning ourselves and each other, and the team probably gets sick of that from me, but always looking for ways to do better than we are. But the things that you just mentioned are so important, because what I don't think that we do as a team enough is to give ourselves credit and to give our staff credit for what a great job they've done. Because do we want to do more? Yes, and we're going to try. Do we want our kids here more? Absolutely, and we're going to try. But we're really proud of the work of our teachers, our support staff, our clerical staff, food service, transportation, custodial. Everybody has they don't blink. You ask them to do something, and they do it, and they do it well, and they do it with compassion, and they do it with a love of our students, and we're very fortunate for that. You asked about ripple effects. So this is a big transition, bringing students back from a hybrid model where they're on campus 2 days a week to 5 days a week is what we're planning for, means a complete reallocation of our resources. And it doesn't just potentially impact UPK through 6, but it could impact the allocation of resources across the district. So just as an example, and something that parents should be fully aware of, as we switch and prepare for students to be here every day, K6, you're no longer doing those hybrid geographic bus runs, right? That people have become accustomed to. You're now rerouting K6 into more normal, traditional bus routes that people are accustomed to, because we're going to be filling those buses a little bit more to greater capacity, and we need to, section up the district and go to a more traditional approach. That means that the bus pickup and drop-off times that people have gotten accustomed to in the hybrid model could change dramatically. Pickup times, drop-off times could change a half an hour or more, because it's going to be an entirely different bus run to get students here every day versus 2 days where we've kind of split the district in half geographically. Food delivery, that's an option that we've been able to provide to our remote families, or students in the hybrid model. We'll now be feeding students K6 in the building every day, and that's going to put an added strain on our food service department. But the busing also puts an added strain on our transportation department. So we're still working through the details, but for example, delivery of meals is not a guarantee to be able to continue. Those meals would be available, but there's the potential through the reallocation of our resources that might have to be a pickup system here on campus. We don't know that for sure, but these are the types of things that we want people to be thinking about. That it's not just about going to 3 feet. It's not just about having elementary kids here 5 days a week, but everything about what we've been doing could change.
Okay. So I think we've painted a pretty solid picture of what it could potentially look like. What are the next steps, the decision-making steps that will happen before? Like when will we find out? When's that, if there's a green light?
So we are collecting feedback from our staff about, what are their areas of concern, as we get ready to make this change, what are the things that concern them so that we're better prepared to address those concerns, and where do they anticipate needing our support? Because it's our job as the leadership team of the district to create the conditions for success, remove barriers, create opportunities, put resources in the right people's hands. So we're collecting that feedback. We're collecting the feedback from families. I cannot stress enough the importance of every UPK through grade 6 family filling out that questionnaire. And I say questionnaire, it's so easy to refer to it as a survey, as like we're testing the waters. We're just trying to get a sense of things. Well, we're doing more than that. It's a questionnaire because we need that student by student information so that we know specifically which student would come back full 5 days in person, which student would go 5 days fully remote, which student is going to need a bus to pick them up and bring them home, which student isn't. That's really important information. And we will follow up with other layers of data collection to help with that process. But we really need 100% completion and cooperation with that questionnaire so that we have as much information to move forward with the current level of planning as possible. So that's due at noon tomorrow. We're hoping then to have that data along with the feedback from our staff, plus all the planning that the administrative team has been doing to present that to the board during the board meeting on Wednesday night and say, this is where we are, this is what we think we can do, this is what we recommend, and this is when we think we can start it. And hopefully that all points in a positive direction, and everybody feels comfortable that we can move forward with full in-person instruction safely. If that's where all the data points, then it's all hands on deck. It's everybody doing lots of things to get ready, and it's supporting our teachers as they transition to a new model. It's supporting our families and being ready to welcome all of our students with open arms to be here together and get back to that sense of normalcy that everybody's been craving.
Great. That does it for me for about questions. I don't know if anybody on the panel wanted to say anything, address anything that might be on their mind.
Just two things that have stuck out to me. One, we didn't get a lot into the change in eating format, because we are 3 feet. Students in the new model would not be eating in the classroom. They'll be eating in cafeteria. So that sort of shifts some of the cleaning responsibility. That's a little less cleaning that has to be done in the classroom because they won't be eating there. But it shifts some of the cleaning responsibility during lunch periods to those tables for sure. And I had another
maybe
and I lost it.
I'll insert a comment and maybe you remember. I have a 7-year-old at home. I know how you need to clean after they eat.
Yeah.
All over the place. So I'm sure the teachers will enjoy that a little bit, not having it in their room.
Well, you bought me time to get my thought back, so thanks.
All right, great.
So the other piece is, 7-12, and there are people watching who might be, what's going on there. And again, I know I mentioned it earlier, we're going to continue to monitor the Ontario County transmission rate. And, once we get through this initial decision-making and recommendation and planning process, we're then going to turn our attention really watching those numbers. And if they're trending like they could hit the right level by May 3rd, then certainly we will send out the same type of questionnaire and duplicate the same planning process. Unfortunately, that transmission rate started pretty high, so there's a long way to go in a short period of time, but it is currently, knock on wood, trending in the right direction, and we'll communicate out. I also want to mention, I know communication went out, I believe, to the senior class today from Mr. Bay Rossi regarding end of the year events, graduation, and other end of the year celebrations. I don't want those to be ignored. New guidance has come out. I know Mr. Bay Rossi is pouring through that guidance. It's a little complicated. The size of an event is tied to the capacity of the venue, but it's also tied to, depending on how big the event is, are you getting into proof of vaccination or negative testing? And he's got several questions out to the Ontario County Department of Health. He's having conversations with our host venues. So I don't want anybody to think that we're not working on those things. We are, and more information will come out as soon as possible as we navigate. Just like this is a complicated planning process, so too is the guidance for those end of the year events.
Well, here's the theme though. The decisions are being made with the stakeholders, right? So graduation is with the seniors and their parents, or where the conversations are happening, and the venues, because the venues are dealing with this in terms of another whole aspect of their businesses, the reopening plan, surveys, bringing our community into the decision-making process to gauge really and truly where they are with the most facts as possible. And I think that's important, that we're bringing stakeholders together to make what will hopefully be in the end, it will be in the end, the safest and best policy plan, right? To do so. So I don't know, anybody else on the panel? I'll give you a 5-second if you want to chime in or say anything. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, great. Well, I want to thank everybody on the panel. I know you guys have been awful busy with a variety of things. And, COVID-19, certainly these past 14 or so months has been number one on the list, plus your normal job. So thank you all for being a part of this panel tonight. I know you have families, know you maybe have a little bit of sunlight left to enjoy. And so thank you for being a part of this tonight. A recording of tonight's virtual town hall has been posted to midlakes.org, and it's also posted to the Midlake Schools YouTube channel. We also encourage families to complete the online questionnaire. That's important. Complete the questionnaire by noon tomorrow, Tuesday, April 20th. With that, we thank everyone for joining us, and be sure to take care of yourself and each other. Good night.